Welcome, everyone. As everyone gets filed in here, we're going to take about 3 minutes to get everybody in, and then we will get started shortly. So do what you got to do, get a coffee, a tea, a snack, send an email, and we will be started in 3 minutes. Thank you for joining. So we've had like 2 days of sunshine here in St. Paul, Minnesota, and it hasn't been sunny for like weeks. I almost feel kind of vampire-ish, like it's like,
It'll go away soon. Don't worry.
I mean, it's a beautiful thing, but it's a little weird too.
Yeah.
How about you? Are you in Denver?
Yep, we're in Denver. So sunny days in the winter are pretty normal for us. Pretty nice. So yeah, we're enjoying it. We've got another storm coming up soon though, so we'll be missing out.
Ooh. Snowstorm?
I think so.
Mm.
I hope so. My daughter's looking forward to doing some sledding, so fingers crossed.
How old is your daughter?
She's 4.5.
Oh my gosh, my daughter just turned 7 this
Oh,
past
wow.
weekend.
Happy birthday.
Yes, it was quite an experience. We had a big party last year, had to invite the whole kindergarten class. So this year I was kind of like, maybe we tune it down a little bit. She's like, okay, Mom.
Yeah.
And she comes home and she's like, Mom, I created a guest list and I had everybody on the playground sign up for the party. Oh my gosh. So yeah, 35 of our closest friends at a trampoline park,
Oh, wow.
How
That
can you
is
say
so
no?
fun.
I mean,
No,
so
you have to let that happen.
have to. You're
Yeah.
committed.
I'm impressed with her ingenuity there.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's terrifying and beautiful all together.
Yeah.
Welcome everybody. We'll get started in 1 minute. Yeah, her guest list. People sign up for it. I was like, you are too funny.
Was it the who's who of the playground? Everyone only the top of the line.
I like that, like, some of the boys cross their name out because they're like, oh, it's a unicorn theme, but then they thought it was a trampoline park, so they're like, okay, we're in, like, we're cool. Well,
Yeah.
let's.
Also, unicorns are cool, so
Absolutely.
missing
We're
out.
Space Kitty unicorn, so you got a lot going on there.
Oh man,
Kitties, unicorns, space,
the whole thing. There's enough there for everybody.
So true. Awesome. It looks like everybody is in. Thank you all for joining and happy Thursday, everyone. I am Tiffany Service Gustafson, a digital strategist with BWG Connect, and we are a network and knowledge sharing group. We stay on top of latest trends, challenges, whatever's shaping the digital landscape. We want to know and talk about it. We are on track to do 500 of these virtual events this year due to the increase in demand to better understand the digital space. And we will do at least 100 in-person small format dinners. So if you happen to live in a tier 1 city in the US, feel free to check out our website, bwgconnect.com, for further details, or email us. We'd love to send you an invite. These dinners are typically 15 to 20 people having a discussion around a certain digital topic, and it's always a fantastic time. We spend the majority of our time talking to brands. That's how we stay on top of the latest trends. Would love to have a conversation with you. Feel free to send me an email at Tiffany, Tiffany, at bwgconnect.com, and we can get some time on the calendar. It's from these conversations we generate the topic ideas we know people want to learn about. And it's also where we gain our resident experts, such as Sigil, who's with us today. Anybody that we asked to teach the collective community has come highly recommended from multiple brands within the network. So if you're ever in need of any recommendations within the digital space, please don't hesitate to reach out. We have a short list of the best, and we'd love to provide that information to you. Also note that we do partner with a talent agency, Hawkeye Search, formerly BWG Talent, that I could put you in contact with as well, should you have any hiring needs. So a few housekeeping items. We started a few minutes after the hour. Rest assured, we will wrap up at least 10 minutes before the end of the hour to give you ample time to get to your next destination or meeting. And first and foremost, we want this to be fun, educational, conversational. So drop those questions, comments into the chat, the Q&A. You can always email me at tiffany@bwgconnect.com, and we will get to them as we move along. So with that, let's rock and roll and start to talk about safeguarding success, practical tips to manage unauthorized resellers and avoid those common pitfalls. The team at Sigil have been awesome friends of the network. I'm going to kick it over to you, Zach. If you can give an introduction on yourself, that would be lovely. And then we can dive right in. Thank you.
That sounds great. Thanks, Tiffany. And hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. Just one thing I want to note off the bat, those dinners that Tiffany mentioned are like renowned as excellent sources to get really good like intelligence and keep a good beat in the industry, meet colleagues in the space. So highly recommend if you can take advantage of that to do that. So those are great. And thank you, Tiffany, for the introduction. And yes, I'm excited to be here and share this with you guys. And just like she said, we want this to be fun and easy and helpful. My main interest here is in making this useful for you all. So if you have questions, like please jump in. I'm happy to answer them. And then otherwise, I'm going to take you through kind of the framework that I developed for how to safeguard the success of your brands, dealing with the issue of unauthorized resellers and common pitfalls. So let me kind of jump in here a little bit. Here's what we're going to cover. I'm going to give you a bit of background on me and my introduction so you can hear where I'm coming from, understand why I'm advising the things that I'm advising, etc. Give some disclaimers, those things. And then I'll give you an overview of the safeguarding your brand framework. And then we'll go through each of the steps there, which involves securing your manufacturing, training your supply chain, and then cleaning up retail here in the United States once it gets here. And then again, additional question opportunity there at the end. So to start, I am an attorney by training. So my background, I started out at a top 10 global firm in Washington, D.C., doing intellectual property related work and litigations, working with great brands like Apple and Samsung and Under Armour, et cetera. After that firm, I went in-house with another great brand, a consumer product brand, and they were expanding globally into 30 plus new territories. And I thought I was prepared for that world and I knew what I was doing. And we walked into just a storm of legal problems, everything that you can imagine. And so we had counterfeits, we had diversion, and we had resellers, we had lawsuits, we had priority battles, just everything you can think of, we had to start to deal with. So that was when I started learning and got my crash course in everything related to brand protection. I was fortunate at that time, I got taken under the wing of a great experienced brand enforcer who had been also working with some Fortune 500 brands and 30 plus years of experience and kind of knew all the ins and outs. And so he sort of took me under his wing and showed me this whole space. So we did raids on factories in China, and we seized goods with German police. We sent jungle raids in South America. We, lawsuits all over the world, sort of you name it, we did it in that space. And because of my background at the big firm, I also was able to develop relationships in-house with Amazon and relationships with now some of the other marketplaces like Walmart, and start to understand how those systems are set up and why, and the incentives in place and how those operations work. So I left that brand that I was with and set up my own legal practice. And my focus has been on brand protection ever since. So I bring a background from all the different forms of intellectual property, patent, copyright, trademark, trade secret, the implications of those different forms, globally in different territories. And then also this real specialty niche into e-commerce, given my relationships with Amazon at the time and now Walmart. I actually helped guide Amazon on some of their policies that they were setting up as they were improving how to deal with sellers, et cetera. So I've gotten to know those systems really well. And I just want to add as a brief caveat and explainer, right? So I am an attorney, a licensed practicing attorney, but what I'm saying here today is not legal advice. Like if you want legal advice, I recommend you speak to your own attorneys. If you need one, I can refer you to any of them. There are many who specialize in this area as well, who I recommend, and be happy to make those introductions for you. And also, as mentioned, I have my own technology company that came up in this space. So essentially, after several years of working with brands who wanted a better, faster way to deal with resellers on the online marketplaces, we eventually launched basically an AI-driven tool to automate the removal of those unwanted sellers from marketplaces. And so that is Sigil, and that is one of the companies that we have a relationship in with the BWG network, but I've known BWG and been a fan and friend of the network since my pre-Sigil days. So excellent community here. But so I will talk about all the different kind of the new technologies that are out there. I will mention Sigil. I'm happy to explain all that in detail, but I don't want this to seem like that's what I'm pushing. It's at the very end. You need to know about it so you can be informed about the options, but it's not the be all end all. And I'm happy to get into all the pros and cons and features for the different solutions as we go through it. So let me know whenever you guys have questions on that too. So let me start. This is an overview, the safeguarding your brand framework. And this is essentially the framework that I developed from being in-house and then advising other brands on how to protect against the issue of unauthorized resellers. Fundamentally, when you're dealing with unauthorized resellers, it is a supply chain issue, and either through good or bad incentives, there is disruption in your supply chain. So this all starts from the very beginning. There's a foundation that you need to establish, which is securing your manufacturing, right? You need to have a safe source to make sure that authenticity is there. And that will also support you as you try to get into or battle with issues of counterfeits. You want to make sure that your originating source is secure and authentic. And then these, the frameworks build on top of each other. From that foundation, then you can start working to train your supply chain. But if you can't ensure, what's coming out of your factory, then it's hard to guarantee what's happening or discover leaks in your supply chain. And once you have that foundation set up, then it's much more effective to start with the cleaning up retail. Now, you can start cleaning up retail before doing some of those things, but you'll have a lot greater success if you build from the bottom up as you do some of those tactics. So what I am not intending to cover, but can if you have questions, are the ways in which the legal regimes assist with this. So you can, if you do any of these things in conjunction with legal counsel, like you'll be more successful, but you don't have to. And my intent here is to give you all the knowledge and information and ammunition that if you go back to your companies, your brands, you'll know, like, okay, here's what we can do as business, folks. We don't need necessarily legal involved in this, and we can take these steps now, to get it and start making a difference. So that is what this will hopefully cover. I'm also going to focus mostly on unauthorized sellers, but if there are questions, or I'll try to talk a little bit about counterfeits along the way on this as well. Let's start with the beginning. Securing your manufacturing. And this is primarily to prevent third shifting. And I'll have a quote for each of these steps. The first one, and I think this is kind of the most fundamental when it comes to brand protection: you cannot trust your own mother. So this was beaten into me in the early days of my training. Brand protection is very much a human-driven activity, and you have to have people working on it and focused on this issue if you're going to try to solve it writ large. And when you're dealing with people, you have to be very careful. And even people you think you can trust, you need to check, and you want to make sure that you're verifying all of that. So that's a preface as we think through all these different areas. Securing your manufacturing, the risk of third shifting, if you're unfamiliar with it, is where your factory will produce additional runs of your product without you knowing, and then they will take that product, all authentic, everything is identical, it's not counterfeit, it's identical to your product, and they'll take it out the back door and they'll sell it directly into channels of diversion and third shift buyers. So there are very large organizations in the United States that seek out supply from this. The best thing that you can do is you need to start building a relationship on the ground with your source of manufacturing. So my experience is primarily dealing with manufacturing sources in Asia. However, even if you are manufacturing in South America or in Eastern Europe or maybe other locations, you need to start building these, human relationships so that you can start to build that trust. And then, and it is important so that they know that you are watching. They need to know that you are paying attention to what's happening in their factories. So what I recommend, annual inspections. Most factories are honored if you reach out and you say, we would love to come and visit. We'd love to visit. We'd love a tour. We want to, strengthen this relationship, et cetera. If you've never traveled overseas to those locations, they will help you set those things up and help coordinate, flights and timing and visas and whatever is necessary in that space. So that can be, it's surprisingly easy to arrange once you kind of commit to doing it. And it's important to do it on a regular basis. The more time that goes between there, there are just different cultural perspectives, and it's not personal, but the incentives are for them to start finding ways to maximize their own profits and benefits. And so it will happen. So that's one we recommend going on a regular basis.
Do you see
Two,
the third shifting happening in certain industries? Is it more prevalent in certain categories than others?
that's a great question. I have seen third shifting in pretty much any industry that I can think of right now. It happens all the time. I think that it's harder to third shift in industries that are like restricted in the raw material supply, because the factory has to go and source the raw materials, and they've got to make sure that they have enough available to meet their customer demands before they can start doing the hidden work. So that can be limited, or if it's like a highly regulated product, like related to the pharmaceutical or medical device area or something, like those are less common to be third shifted because they're so regulated. But otherwise, I've seen third shifting in consumer goods space, electronics, beauty, furniture. There's a lot of opportunity there. And it's not personal, just like a theme for all of this. It's just like, understand you're in the silent war fighting against, everybody else. They are trying to make a living for their families just like you are. And so you have to do what you got to do. So the second point, multiple sources for every product. This is for you. You as a brand should have multiple production sources, multiple factories for everything that you're producing. This is twofold, right? One is just a risk prevention for you, so that if you have a pandemic in the city or some sort of natural disaster, you can still source product. But secondly, this goes to making sure that the factories know that they could lose your business. And so it takes a little work to set this up, but we recommend, there are typically factories ready to try to earn your business at almost any trade show that you as a brand are going and attending. And so you can meet many factories there, help arrange visits. I recommend setting them up on the same time as you go do your annual inspections with your other brand or your other manufacturer, and block off a few days, right? You don't tell them what you're off to do those few days, but you just tell them, like, we're going to need these few days, for our own work. And then go tour those other factories, build those relationships, set that up, and let them know, right? Your new factory will know that they're trying to earn business from the old factory, but let the factory, your existing manufacturing partner, know, like, hey, we are looking to supplement our production. We're going to split our next PO of this line with another manufacturing facility, et cetera, just so that they know you're not trying to be mean or malicious to them, but they need to know that they are either losing business or at risk of losing the entire business. Otherwise, that will keep them much more consistent in protecting your, that relationship with you. But as a piece of warning here, you definitely do not want those factories to know about each other, like which is which, because they will try to find out. They will investigate it. They will try to find that other factory. Then they will share notes, and then they will team up on you and collude on it. So that is just part of the game. You want them to know that you have a secondary supply source, but you don't want them to know who it is. And then the third piece to this, now that they know they can lose your business and they know that you are watching, you want to try to take steps in the factory to secure basically your molds that you have, your production molds, or your design files, et cetera. And some of this, to be frank, is like security theater. Like, there's no perfect foolproof way to stop it, right? But the point is, you're mitigating your risk by demonstrating that you're caring attention to it. So for things like securing your molds here, what we would do is we would have factories install separate cages around our production molds, and our molds had to be kept in this specifically locked caged unit, distinct, separate from any of the other molds for any other customers and clients, and then set up like a smart lock on that, so we could see in the app from the smart lock when that cage was being unlocked or not, and so you can go and monitor when the molds essentially are being used. And if you have been doing inspections and going and building this relationship, and if they know that they could lose your business, asking them to install these cages is like a low lift. That has not been a challenge. One of my favorite stories for this is a brand that we worked with used kind of the invisible dog collar fences, and they put in a cage, and then they attached the dog collar tracking unit to the molds, and then installed the invisible fence around the cage. So that way, not just whenever the door to the cage opened, but whenever a mold got pulled out of the cage to go put into the production unit, they were able to see like as it went in and out. So you can get creative, and a lot of these technologies have come way down in price, but you need to kind of start from your foundation of going and being there, and then looking and inspecting, etc. So those are good steps there. Oh, on the encrypt your files also, again, that's security theater, but there are technology companies too who can track the number of times that those encrypted files are opened, and so you can sort of get the same sense of access on the digital side. Now that you've got your foundation for your strong manufacturing piece, now you can start training your supply chain, right? And so obviously this is an area to try to stop diversion. And this is also a piece where, the quote I like for here for this, I'm sorry, is that every penny counts. Because it all adds up. It's an expensive battle. It's a never-ending battle, right? Even as you get control of it, there are always new leaks or new things that pop up. People face new challenges. So it's a never-ending battle. Every penny counts here. So I want to cover here different ways to go about tracking and trying to discover the source of leak for diversion, some of the new technologies that are out. And I'll try to cover off on kind of inexpensive methods all the way up to the more expensive methods, and some of the pros and cons in each, right? And so as I describe this whole safeguarding framework, you should be thinking of this through the lens of which of these tactics are going to work for, my type of brand, my type of manufacturing, my distribution channels, et cetera, right? So first, let me start kind of on the low end. Tracking without any kind of technology, right? This is obviously simple, the low-cost solution. It's a little slow, but there's some cool little tips and tricks that you can use for this area. So one, if you want to be simple and cheapest possible, is to do a salt and pepper test. And so we would be like when you're out there on one of your annual inspections, or after you go and you do this a couple times, you can kind of train your factory up on how you want them to do it, and they know that they could lose your business if they don't do it the right way, right? Then you can have them start deploying these salt and pepper tests. But a salt and pepper test is where for whatever case or units that you have going to a particular area that you want to see if that's the source of diversion, then in those units you throw a little bit of salt or a little bit of pepper, or some can get salt and pepper, or some get no salt or pepper, right? So you have a couple different ways to test for that. And then you send all your units through that, through that area. And then when it gets through and you go do your test buys to identify, then you can know, okay, what is the generalized leaky area for here, right? And you do that, then you can narrow down. So if you discover that your European territory is your primary leaky source, well, then you do another set of salt and pepper tests where you divide up, your distribution into those territories and find, okay, now we see that it's coming over from Western Europe, our distributor in Western Europe, and you can layer on these salt and pepper tests in order to discover out those leaky sources. Super cheap, but it does take time as you have to do that, and you're waiting for it to move through the entire flow of product. Another simple one, though, that can make it a little bit faster, but a little bit more intensive, and this is, again, something I think you'd want to be on the ground to deploy, is to use like a blacklight marker, and you mark the products in a very discrete place, somewhere they're not going to see, your customers never see, with the blacklight marker. The benefit of the blacklight system instead of the salt and pepper system is that you can have all kinds of different types of marks and symbols. And so instead of running, multiple rounds of the salt and pepper test to narrow down to a leak, right? You could, if you do letters, right, A through Z, you can run 26 tests in one batch, right, and really track it more narrowly. But it's a more complicated to set up, and so that one's a harder one to entrust to your factory to put into place. But that's another kind of useful tool there. It's also another useful tool when trying to distinguish between counterfeits and diversion. And so, several brands that I've known or worked with have set up basically a blacklight test just strictly to show authentication for their product. And so they'll do, when you work with, for example, Customs and Border Protection for doing anti-counterfeit investigations, you can guarantee that the authenticity by having those little blacklight marks, as opposed to, the counterfeits won't have those. So that's another way you can utilize that technique if you're more concerned on the counterfeit side. I'll also just flag on the counterfeit piece. You definitely want to be registered with all your key Customs and Border Protection, and ports of entry in your supply chain there. So if that's something that your brand hasn't done, reach out, let me know, and I'll get you connected up with somebody who has that ability to kind of move that forward, because you want to make sure you start building those relationships to fight with counterfeits. Tracking using the Internet of Things. So after the simplest sense of tracking through your diversion supply chain, we can start utilizing better technology. RFID and Internet of Things, like these different types of tech, have been around for a while now. Right? We're all a little bit more comfortable with them, and they've iterated into new generations, which are really interesting. Some of the new stuff I find really fascinating. So the upside to this is it's faster because you can track your whole supply chain. You're not waiting to sell a piece all the way through and have it move through, but it's more expensive, and in some cases much more expensive, right? So setting up an RFID station in your warehouse or in your factories, et cetera, ideally you want all your units to be flown through like a single point of RFID tracking there. And so that's, as you build a scanning unit or install a scanning unit, that can cost you, hundreds to $300,000, per installation. So depending on how big your network is, that can be pretty pricey. And then you've got the RFID tags. Now the tags are pretty cheap, but depending on how many units you're sending, right, that can get pretty high. But the advantage of RFID is you can track every unit, and so you can know where everything is there. You can do this also with Internet of Things now. So there are kind of Wi-Fi enabled or Bluetooth enabled trackers that you can have installed with your pallets and ship them through. And those kind of monitoring sensors, rather than it like taking a picture of a specific tag or however you're scanning the tag, right? They sense proximity. Those are a little bit cheaper and easier to install, right? So you're in the tens of thousands of dollars for installing those units now, but the labels are more expensive. And so, like, there's one of my favorite companies in this space that's doing this is called Reelables, REEL, like a reel, and then label. So they have these labels, and they are Bluetooth sensor labels. So they have very low power battery technology built into a flat printed label, and it can connect up to Bluetooth right now. Their latest prototype is in 5G, which is really exciting. And so, but those labels, you wouldn't want to put those labels on every unit because those labels are too expensive, but you could track it at like a case level or pallet level, and then that's a little bit more consistent. So there are some cool innovations there. Or, once you do one of your low tech tests, like if you do a blacklight test, right, layer these strategies on top of each other, do a blacklight test, find out your leaky area, and then you can run like one of these Bluetooth with one of their mobile trackers, and you can just live ping watch it move, throughout the globe and see exactly where the point of diversion occurs. So there's some cool pieces you can add to it and the nice thing of that, as opposed to like throwing an Apple AirTag in the box, which you can, is that AirTag's got to be close to a Bluetooth sensor to give a reading. But these other companies, they'll pair it. So you get the Bluetooth, capable technology and send it up. So those are so that's a pretty cool new technology that's coming out. And as those, in 5 years, as those technologies become more commoditized, those prices will come down, but that's kind of where you're at right now. The other interesting thing I just want to touch on is blockchain tracking, right? And I think everybody wanted blockchain to be the solution that we were looking for in this space, 4 or 5 years ago. So we were so excited that blockchain was going to fix our supply chain problems. But the problem of associating the open ledger to the physical product still just that remains a difficult challenge to get through there. So there are certain niche categories and companies that where it works, like in certain gemstones, and you can track like the unique basically structure of the gemstone to a blockchain. Like that's interesting, but most products that's not really applicable to. You can do QR codes and just try to attach them onto the product, or a lot of and that was kind of explored in some of the high-end fashion and apparel brands, but then you still have that tag on there, which is challenging. I will say I think probably the most interesting new piece of tech in this area is from Systech, and so they have a cool solution for e-fingerprinting, which is basically your existing like barcodes, right? The problem is barcodes, typically a 2D barcode, you can fake it, right? And you can produce other barcodes. But they have technology that will scan kind of a multi-layer, like UV, I'm not entirely familiar, but like UV or whatever it is, multi-layer, the ink, and they'll read out different like microscopic imperfections in the printing, and then create a fingerprint of those microscopic imperfections for every piece of existing inventory you have and attach that to the blockchain. So then you can take your whole inventory, have it scanned by their camera, and I think it's like if you want to install one of their single point cameras in the in your warehouse, it's about $20,000 or $30,000, but you get one of those, and then you can scan every one of your labels. There's a cost for that association, but then you can get a blockchain token for all of your existing inventory without having to change your printing or your setup there. I find that to be a really fascinating like way for authenticating your product, really effective against the counterfeiting space, right? Because now your whole, all your units, are authentic. Anybody that doesn't match to the blockchain, is a counterfeit. So very effective for the counterfeit space. In the diversion piece, it's almost overkill, right? At that point, you could just serialize your barcodes, and they have technology to do that. So you can just serialize your barcodes. But if you're sitting on a giant inventory of material, then yeah, you can do both, right? You can e-fingerprint and blockchain, and then start serializing your labels going forward. And so that has an advantage.
And what was the name of the company again?
Systech. Systech. Yeah, they kind of came up in the pharmaceutical space. And so, being able to really track and carefully monitor all the, product is effective there. So then the last thing I want to say is using signaling and decoys, right? So I just want to empower you, everybody, as you're working to become like safe guardians of your brand, so to speak, is to be creative and understand that like these are humans at play and human relationships. And there's a lot of value to be gained out of just signaling that you're watching without actually watching, or sending decoys, but you have to be careful, and you want to vary these efforts. So like, for example, after you've been visiting your factory, et cetera, and then you train them on how to just attach an additional sign. It can just be a piece of paper that goes with, your pallet that says like, tracking material included, or like authentication monitoring technology included, or some kind of signal to show people like, oh, like the brand is monitoring what happens, right? Like tracking technology on every unit in this pallet or something. And then send it out, right? Because then once your distributor gets that, even if they're the ones who divert, well, they're not going to divert that one, right? They're going to be like, oh, I don't want to do that. And then sometimes they'll get pallets that don't have that, right? But then they'll wonder like, is it safe to divert? I don't know. So like you want to do it a little bit randomly. And you can throw cool decoys in there. So like I love getting, like the external phone chargers, right? They look like just little black encased boxes or something. And just like secure that to a pallet with some screws and like a U-bolt or something. And they're going to be like, oh, that must be it. They've got some kind of, black box tracking tech. Anyway, and then and send it out to your distributors. Say, hey, if you ever receive one of these in your shipment, go ahead and mail it back to us at this thing, right? Like whatever. So then they are constantly wondering what to do and if it's safe or not, right? And so little tricks like that are useful. Okay, I'm going to move on to cleaning up. Well, I'll just get into it. We're going to clean up the retail now.
So, and friendly reminder, questions, comments, put into the chat, the Q&A, and we'll get to them here towards the end. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you, Tiffany. So cleaning up retail, now the downside to training your supply chain is that it tends to be very expensive unless you do some of those kind of like guerrilla tactics, right? Like that's why I love a good blacklight test and decoys. Like that is a nice, cost-effective way to train up your supply chain. But because otherwise tracking every piece of inventory, you end up paying for a lot of stuff to track when like only a small part of it is the real problem area. And so these techniques that I want to get here into cleaning up retail, right? This is where it's designed to focus more, cost effectively on like where are the problem pieces here, right? And this is where customers in the United States or wherever the issue is, like this is where they're getting abused with some type of like diverted product, and you don't know how well it's been handled or stored, right? There's risks to that customer experience with it, especially if you're in if you're in the CPG space or anybody who has expiration dates or something, like that's a real risky issue there. In this area, so there's a lot to talk about here, and I'm probably going to add a little bit here, but let me just start with buyback programs at the top here. So the first two here, buyback programs, map monitoring. I assume everyone on this call has already heard about these and is pretty familiar. They're very traditional tools and techniques. Most brands I talk to don't want to do buyback programs, but I got to tell you, for the brands that do it, it works great. It's a really effective way to get this stuff out of the hands of the people who shouldn't have it and get it back into where you want. But you need to be mindful of how you do it, and so it's I think teams are really resource constrained, and then also it's capital intensive, right? You got to buy it back, right? You got to have cash on hand, and so that's why it's hard to deploy and implement, but it is effective when you do it. For those of you who are interested in doing it, I just want to hit some highlights, best practices. Oh, and I missed my quote. Keep fighting the good fight. Anyway, it's important to just keep consistent with this, right? And never give up. But when you're dealing with cleaning up retail, I know it's a whack-a-mole. Everyone hates that it's a whack-a-mole. It's a whack-a-mole. And don't give up, right? Don't let them all win, I guess. So when you're doing your buyback program, it all comes down to incentives and people who are trying to make a living and making it work, right? Most important piece that I think is ensuring that whoever you're buying it back from stops buying your product, so that this is a one-time transaction. I have heard horror stories of brands who set up buyback programs only to discover that the people that they were buying them back from had a consistent source of the product, and they were just paying extra for this, right? You don't want that. So you want to make sure you're getting commitments not to violate. You need to then know who they are, where they are getting the product, where they kept and stored the product, right? Send your own truck to go pick it up, right? You want to know everything about them so that they know that you can come in and sue them if they violate or what have you, right? You want to have that authority over them. But to get that to happen, you typically have to negotiate a bit more for that. And so you've got to pay for the product, right? So if you can land in at a buyback that ends up 10% above what they bought it for, you're in a good spot, right? That is a place where they are going to turn a tiny amount of profit to cover they'll probably break even with all the fees. And a lot of times, especially if they have to pull it out of Amazon FBA, that's where a lot of the challenge is they'll end up paying Amazon fees to get it out and get it over to you, et cetera. That's why they want to, they will want you to agree to pay them a little bit more so that they don't come out negative on it. And brands hate that, right? But that's an emotional response. And this is a non-emotional strategy. You want to be taking a clear-eyed approach to this. And so it's hard, but for the executives on the line who might be interested in this, set your egos down and do what's best for the business and for the brand. The challenge is ideally that 10% is still going to be less than, right, what it would take for you to try to, reproduce that or get your landed COGS, et cetera. That doesn't always happen. But if the product is in good enough condition that you can then put it right back into, retail and available inventory, you can still clear that margin again and come out net positive. So that's why the brands who do set this up that I've worked with have had a really positive experience with it. But it's logistical and it's heavy to do, but can be really successful. Map monitoring tools. There are so many great map monitoring tools out there now, right? I'm sure there are friends of the network map monitoring tools, but if you want to be referred to one, I'm happy to introduce you to many. Map monitoring, in case you don't know, MAP stands for minimum advertised price. And then it's just a monitoring tool, price monitoring tool. And so it crawls the web, finds the price, and makes sure that the people who are selling are keeping it at that minimum advertised price, right? MAP tools are not intended to deal with unauthorized sellers. MAP tools are intended to deal with your authorized sellers, right? They're the ones who are subject to MAP. The benefit of a MAP tool is so that your authorized partners know that you're watching. And so that, that combined with like having them return your decoy external batteries, et cetera, just improves performance and behavior. But it's separate from dealing with unauthorized sellers. Many of the MAP tools have, however, tried to build systems to help address the unauthorized seller problem. They tend to all do the same general thing, which is try to contact the seller and build that contact information. Some, like Price Spider, for example, has probably the largest and most complete database of seller contact information. They've been at it the longest. They've acquired several folks in the space, very sophisticated for that seller information. However, like that giant database of seller information constantly requires cleaning. And so there are challenges associated to making sure that data is accurate. The idea is that everybody who's using Prowl at Price Spider is hopefully updating that data regularly, but it doesn't always happen, right? So there's some data cleaning issue there. That will be true everywhere. TrackStreet is another really well-known map solution here, and they have a nice tool for automating cease and desist letters out to those sellers that you can find. And so they also are seeking contact information and trying to have a nice collection of information for sending those letters. But again, you only get so far, and those sellers are trying to not have that contact information put out there. So those are tools. They are effective to a point. They are relatively less expensive than things like buyback programs, which can be more effective but more expensive. But so there's some nice automated tools there, and then they have the benefit of monitoring your authorized partners. Other investigative tools that are out there, some of the new things here, and I guess I'll add, maybe I should have talked about Amazon Transparency on the supply chain, but I'll add in kind of Amazon Transparency here as an investigative tool. And there's another really interesting tech company that helps you kind of identify your source of diversion. I'll start with Amazon Transparency. If you guys haven't heard about Amazon Transparency, it's a program for basically individually labeling all of the units that come through Amazon. And so if it doesn't have a transparency sticker with like a serialized number that matches into Amazon's serialized system, then it won't be allowed to sell, right? And so the downside is you've got to sticker everything, but the upside is Amazon will start controlling it at the point of Amazon. It doesn't control it off Amazon, but it'll help with the issue on Amazon. The big misconception about transparency that I like to make sure everybody knows is that transparency is only for anti-counterfeit, not for resellers. And it is explicitly in their terms that you cannot use the transparency system to block resellers. And if you do, that they will suspend or cancel your account. And so a lot of people, when transparency came out, were asking like, oh, should we do this? Should we sign up for this? And I told a lot of them like, do you have counterfeits? If you don't have counterfeits, like this is not the program for you, basically. So if you are a primarily Amazon-driven business though, and like all your stuff is there and you've got counterfeits, transparency is a great potential solution for investigating. The other really interesting investigative tool is this company called Diversion. And their approach to trying to solve a gray market is that they take, let's say you have a rogue seller, one of these unauthorized sellers in your listing, and they're selling 20 of your different products. What they do is they look at those 20 products, and then they go through and they scan all of your POs that have sent to everybody. And they say like, okay, well, who has purchased all of these 20 products, and kind of match up who the potential sellers are for that point of diversion, so that the brand can then go back to that person and say, hey, we've discovered this leak, you need to stop sharing it, etc. Really cool, innovative solution. The challenges there is that it's really only effective for very high SKU level count brands, because you need to be able to get to a relatively unique kind of a list of those products that comes out. And for certain companies, apparel with lots of different variants, or shoe brands with lots of different sizes, etc., sizes and color swatches, where you can really finally get into that like kid size 4 red sneaker, right, to identify those leaks, then it can be nicely effective. Otherwise, it takes a little bit more collaboration to send unique SKUs to unique like places in order to make it really effective. So, but it is a really interesting kind of new tool that's out there. And then lastly, I would be remiss if I didn't mention, Sigil is our new kind of AI-powered auto removal technology that we have. And so this basically takes my existing legal experience and my knowledge of how Amazon and Walmart operate, and used AI to build like a robot investigator that automates the legal process of the investigation into those sellers, puts together a case file, and then submits it over to Amazon or to Walmart. And then those case files get processed by the marketplace, and then the sellers get taken down. So like the distinction there, like unlike the solutions that you'll get out of the map monitoring tools, which are sending cease and desist letters to the sellers, tools like the AI-powered auto removal will just go and take the issue straight to the marketplace, where that's sort of the point of pain, and have the seller, the marketplace, removed, just straight off from that. So the benefit of that tends to be that it's much faster and much more effective than just sending out angry letters that often get ignored. The downside to that is, it's not necessarily for every brand, and you kind of need to do a little bit of consulting with someone or with one of our team to figure out if it's going to be applicable to you. But by and large, if you're the type of brand for which it qualifies, then it's kind of I'm trying to not boast about it, but it's a very useful technique that you can use to clean up the issue, on the back end, essentially. So that's a whole suite, kind of a whole range of different tools that you can use to help deal with the issue, depending on where your brand is positioned and what those issues and concerns are at various different price points, right, that you have, depending on your budget or your bandwidth for it. And with that, we'll go out to questions.
That's awesome. Oh my gosh, you have to be like one of the most interesting people at a cocktail party. Like the stories you must have. Wow.
Thank you, Deborah. We've had some fun times. There have been had some people up in my face, and yeah.
Write a book. Wow.
It's wild.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, we do have quite a few questions here, so
Okay.
thank you very much, you guys, for engaging here. We'll start at the top. So
Yep.
you had mentioned the smart lock systems to
Yeah.
work, be able to protect your molds or whatever it may be. So if you're going to do that, do you have to know exactly when they are scheduled to produce the item in order for this process to work?
No, that's a good question. The idea here is you can give the code to unlock the smart lock to your factory partners, but you also have access to the app on your phone, and so you can see when they punch it in and open it and use it. So you don't have, if you want, you can do much more kind of control style, where only you remotely unlock the gate at that certain time, right? Or have them WhatsApp you a message saying we're ready to begin, unlock. or what have you. But most commonly what I see is you give the code to your factory partner so that they can go in and do all that, but you have the ability to watch and audit and verify. That makes sense.
Awesome. With the auto removal technology you mentioned, so
Yep.
you have to be the manufacturer of the product to utilize that.
No, you don't have to be the manufacturer of the product for that. It does work with, for example, we have some agencies that we work with on it. The key thing to ensure, though, if you're an agency or some type of representative for the manufacturer, is you just need to verify that you have the legal authority in this, narrow context to act on behalf of the brand. So that, right, because the way that the technology is set up is it basically turns any e-commerce manager into the power of like myself as an attorney. And so, like if you use the software, everything's going to be strictly legally compliant, and it's going to run through the process as if you had an attorney kind of guiding you through that. But you don't have an attorney, right? So you need to have the legal authority needs to come from, the originating source is going to be the brand, the manufacturer who has those legal rights, and then that can transfer into your agency to Sigil and then to filing on the marketplace.
Fantastic. Well, obviously AI powered removals are a great way for removing 3P unauthorized resellers. But outside of that solution, in your opinion, what is another way to remove 3P sellers from your Amazon listings?
Another way to remove them from the listings. I don't think you're going to like many of these answers, which is why we started Sigil. But I know of brands who will do some of these techniques, and some of these are good and bad. Or so yeah, there's varying degrees of bad here. So one, cease and desist letters, go straight after them. If you can find them, great, and you can try to get them off. That's the traditional one. Two, buy out the inventory. If they have a small inventory count and you're running a deal or something, and it's a Prime Day or what have you, and they've got 5 units, like buy them out and just get them off there, and then like you eat the cost. 3, I strongly do not recommend this, but some brands will file counterfeit complaints, and that'll pop the seller off, and then the seller can go in and appeal and try to prove to authenticate. It works. Amazon will pop them off, but you have just violated the Lanham Act, and unless you have a reasonable belief that they are in fact counterfeit, and the Lanham Act has sanctions and attorney's fees claims against you for breaching it. So I just like, it happens, but like, oof, don't do it. I also know brands who use like black hat hackers. Those communities exist. You can get them off that way. Don't recommend. You can try to convert them into authorized partners if you can reach out to them. But that tends to be hard. Typically, the people who have set up operations to be unauthorized partners have kind of an arbitrage model or something in place, and they don't want to be governed by the restrictions of the authorized model. But you can try that. Off the top of my head, that's kind of what I can come up with.
Fantastic. In your opinion, what's the best web monitoring tool for general day-to-day gray market?
The best one. That's a really good question. So the ones that I mentioned are really good. Like PriceBiter is just it's really broad, covers a lot of space, which is useful. They're expensive, and so that's a bit of a trade-off, right? These tend to charge by ASIN, marketplace, how many times you're scanning per day, etc. But they tend to be very complete. MapTrap is kind of a smaller one, and particularly in the kind of the home goods, Joomla product space, and they're really strong. I think they have a really nice monitoring piece to it, a little bit less expensive. TrackSuite's been a leader in the space for a long time. Their data tends to be a little complex, kind of like PriceSpider's does. You can also get into, there's some of like up and comers, like Intelligence Node, I think it's based out of India, and they do a really nice job with image matching for it. So like if your issue is on eBay, folks like Intelligence Node or Wiser, which do a lot of work on the image scanning and recognition piece. They tend to be more effective than eBay. So it sort of varies depending on your distributions, your marketplaces you care about, right? Your cost structures. All these folks have different unique attributes, right, for their different little areas. That's why there's so many of them.
Got it. And one more here. Auto removal. What are the requirements for a business to be able to use that?
It's a lot to kind of get into on the call. I guess what I'd say is you've got to make sure that you've got, intellectual property registered for your brand. The trademarks are filed in the event that you want to use copyright on the basis copyrights are secured. That it's usually best if you've already been counseled by an attorney, so you have kind of authorized seller programs and policies set up in place. And yeah, those are, and then, yeah, like the more readily accessible you keep your data. So if you can identify who's authorized and not authorized to be selling, and you know what I mean, in a more, the more efficiently you can do that, the better you are using this service. It's the kind of thing that if you do have questions about how to get set up with that, I guess I would say reach out, and then we can do kind of a free audit for you to see if this is, something that qualifies. It shouldn't take too long. And then if for whatever reason a piece is missing, right? Obviously BWG has many friends in the network, or I have many friends who are also in the network, and we can introduce you to get you set up with whoever you need to in order to get your brand to that point.
Fantastic. Yeah, we definitely encourage follow-up conversation with Zach and the Sigil team, and we'd love to have a conversation with you because that's how we get the intel for future events. So with that, it is a formal wrap. Zach, thank you so much for the intel, the knowledge that was shared. Fantastic information. Thank you all for joining today. Have a fantastic Thursday and going into the weekend. So with that, take care. See you in the next event. Thank you so much, Zach.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Timmy. Great job. All right. Take care.